Hey folks, in this episode we discuss what goes into preparing for the hunting fishing season. We talk about pulling tree stands and hanging trail cameras as the hunting season winds down, all while exploring plans and goals for the upcoming fishing season.
That's right, Pat. Be sure to listen for our aspirations near the end of the episode so that you can hold us accountable for our goals, like finally getting a fishing line into the Chattahoochee River. Also, if you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating or a review, because once you subscribe, you'll never miss an episode.
All right, thanks for giving us a listen, and without further ado, let's get on to the episode. Welcome to the East Coast Hunt Fish Hike podcast. I'm Pat Carroll, hunter, fisherman, and general outdoor enthusiast. Join me and my brother Mike as we share tactics, recount stories, and plan our upcoming outdoor adventures. Welcome to the East Coast Hunt Fish Hike podcast, your home for stories and tactics in the woods and on the water. I'm Pat Carroll, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and co-host, Mike. How's it going, Mike?
Yeah, it's going well.
Good. Today we're going to talk a little bit about our prep activities for the spring. As far as how we're prepping for fishing season and stuff like that, as well as what we're doing to kind of finish up the hunting season, and then also a little bit about our plans as we move into the warmer months. But before we get into all that, I just want to talk a little bit about our social media. So, if you haven't already, please follow us on Instagram. Our handle is EC_huntfishhike_pod. That's where you can, get any sort of new information or any give us any comments or feedback on what we're doing. Ask us any questions, and let us know what topics you guys want to listen to, and we can kind of go from there and adjust the podcast accordingly. And along with that, rate and review. Giving us a good rating and reviewing us is the best way for us to move up the charts, and as well as for us to get into other folks' headphones, so you guys can listen to us and we can reach more people ultimately. So yeah, rate and review, and tell your friends, and hopefully we can start telling our stories to lots and lots of people.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like our best way of getting feedback as to how it is that we're doing, different things that we can talk about in terms of topics. And we like hearing from you guys too. It kind of helps to be able to know that we're not just saying this out into the void, that we've got some people that are listening there. And we want to be able to talk about the things that you guys want to hear. So for sure, as Pat's saying, make sure you rate, make sure you review, and give us a little bit of feedback there. Tell us how it is that we're doing, and let us know what it is that you want to hear about, because ultimately we're here for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into spring prep and hunting, fishing season primer and so on, let's go into a little bit about what we've done in the outdoors recently. I know personally, I've had a chance to get outside a little bit. We had the chance to get up into the White Mountains and do a little bit of skiing over this
Awesome.
past weekend. We don't get out to go skiing all that frequently, and I'm kind of a little bit more of a newer skier. I was a big snowboarder for a while, but we had the opportunity to get up into the mountains, do a little bit of skiing on one of the big mountains. Got outside with my oldest daughter. I will say it might not have gone as well this time as it did the last time,
Oh no,
but
what happened?
yeah, no, it was mostly good. She was excited to get out there, but once we got out, it was a little bit more challenging this time, just getting her, focused and what was going on. And then ultimately we got ready. I got her prepped to, get on that little magic carpet. And then all of a sudden the magic carpet broke down.
Oh
So then we couldn't
no.
go on the magic carpet. We tried trekking up the little hill by ourselves, and then, all chaos broke loose. We managed to get down a couple times, but after that we decided, better to live to fight another day,
Yeah.
keep some smiles on our face, head back to the
Yeah.
lodge, and
Have some
let
hot cocoa and call it a
exactly
day. Yeah.
call it a day, better than ruin the skiing endeavor entirely. But I did have a chance to get out on the mountain a little bit with the
Awesome.
skis, which was super fun. I haven't been able to do that in years past, just with the youngins. And I got on first. I did a couple intermediates, felt pretty good. My sister-in-law was ski with me. She was hanging out. We were doing having a lot of fun up there. I did get down a couple black diamonds, which was pretty good for me on skis. I think it's probably
Very
the first
nice.
time I've been down black diamonds on skis. And then there was another slope that I didn't think looked too steep, but then after managed to handle it, fell once, but mostly because of ultimately how steep it was. But it ended up being a double black diamond, so which I'm pretty proud of myself for being able to get down those
Awesome.
double blacks. It was pretty exciting, and most of it had to do with the fact that it had really good snow.
Yeah, I
And
was
we
I was about to ask how were the conditions? And obviously you're skiing. I don't know if you want to share where it was that you were, or I know you're skiing kind of up in New England, which for those of you listening at home, that's where Pat and I kind of like grew up, going up to the mountains in New Hampshire, growing up to the mountains, some of them like up in Maine, and even some in kind of like Massachusetts, in northern Massachusetts. Like we I still have, even down here, I rep the Ski the East equipment, and I've got like the stickers and everything because of my love of skiing in the East. And when I was in college, I had a couple of opportunities. Shout out Stephen Leto, my roommate in college. I used to go out and visit him out in California, and obviously the mountains and everything out there are beautiful. And the experiences that I've had out there are unmatched. But there's something kind of special about skiing in the East and Eastern skiing. So one thing, as I'm sure that Pat's going to get into here, is that sometimes the conditions, and depending upon the snow, things can get a little bit icy. That's kind of the stereotype. But it sounds like this experience for you kind of breaks that stereotype. It sounds like you had pretty good snow. Is that right?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So we were skiing up in Waterville Valley for this trip, which I've skied there before, and I found it to be a little bit icy in the
Hmm.
past. They don't call the East Coast the ice coast for nothing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's habitually pretty icy over here. But we happened to get about 5 inches of snow earlier in the week, and then another couple inches the night before we went. So
Oh, that's
everything,
perfect.
so there was, I would say, there was powder on every single trail.
Wow.
Waterville, I mean, I don't know if this is usual for them, but they certainly didn't groom everything. It wasn't like
Hmm.
all groomed, and maybe that's what their usual mo is. At a lot of the mountains that I usually ski, I feel like they groom everything, but
Yeah.
that was certainly not the case this time. And it left a lot of powder, which was fun. I mean, I haven't skied a lot of powder. I've done snowboarding in powder, but it is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Just as far as how you handle the deeper snow. But it was fun. It was super always exciting to ski powder, and now I feel like I've kind of got the ski bug again. I really want to keep trying
Yeah.
to get out there. I mean, I know ultimately, as we're recording this, we're in March now, so not as many ski opportunities now, but excited to see what next season brings, and excited to maybe get on the mountain a little bit more as we move into next winter.
Yeah, definitely more opportunities for you guys up north than I have down here in Georgia. Especially, I mean, that goes for everything from snow to actually just having the topography to be able to have the mountains. I've skied Waterville a couple of times, and everything that you're saying, it, like, kind of tracks. It was I did a weekend up to, I think we hit like Cannon Mountain, and as well as Waterville. I think it was like my sophomore year of college, and I had a chance to go up there with one of my friends over our winter break, and I liked Waterville. It was actually like unseasonably warm.
Hmm.
I was there over a New Year's trip, and I was reminiscing. I had this like it was an awesome New Year's party. We kind of rang in the new year, but the weather was unseasonably warm. It was
Hmm.
like in the I want to say it was like it had, we there was a little bit of snow that was on there, but things got kind of slushy almost
Yeah.
because it was in like the upper 30s, maybe even into the 40s, and like unseasonably warm, especially for late December, early January,
Hmm.
up at like Waterville Cannon, and the mountain, though, still, even though it was slushy, it was still great. I've got really fond memories of Waterville and Cannon too, actually. So
Yeah, I
those
don't
of you
think I've
skiing,
ever actually skied Cannon.
Cannon's it's a great mountain, and when I was there, I was snowboarding. I want to say, almost positive I was snowboarding
Hmm.
rather than skiing. I think that it's a skiing mountain, though. I think that there's lots of mogul runs. There's lots of there's runs that are. I mean, they range probably lean a little bit more towards the intermediate or kind of like the expert trails,
Hmm.
which is probably a reason why Pat. we and our family never really went up to Cannon.
Yeah.
And I mean, Pat and I, when we were growing up, I mean, I do have lots of really fond memories, Pat, of having like the car essentially like packed up the night before and waiting to get that phone call about whether or not we were going to be off of school. And then as soon as we got that phone call that we were going to be off from school and that things were canceled, Pat and I would jump into his old was it a 91 Jeep? Was that
Yep, it
the
was a
maroon Jeep?
91 Jeep Cherokee.
91 Jeep Cherokee. We jump into Pat's Jeep Cherokee and we would make our way up to, and it was one of those things where we could have gotten adventurous and gone to different mountains, but it's like we knew that Loon would be good. And so we'd
Yeah.
always go up to Loon Mountain, up in New Hampshire, up in Lincoln, New Hampshire. In fact, I'm wearing my, my White
Oh
Mountain Bagel,
yeah.
from,
Yep,
my
White
White
Mountain Bagel
Mountain
Company,
Bagel beanie
Lincoln.
from Lincoln, New Hampshire. So
Yeah.
shout out to Lincoln, New Hampshire. Um, but yeah, the we would always head up to Loon, and some of the best skiing actually that I can remember were on those days because it was like such good conditions, such
Mhm.
great powder. We were off for school for that matter because of the fact that we had so much snow, and the roads. If you could get up there before the snow really got bad, you could be up there like skiing on slopes that were totally abandoned because it'd be in the
Mhm.
middle of the week and the conditions would be phenomenal. So I mean, the some of those. I mean, and I've gone out to Squaw. I've gone out to Tahoe for a couple of years. I went out there when I was in college, but there are some memories that I have of skiing over on the East Coast that are every bit as great as some of those West Coast skiing. So I always get a little bit defensive when people start comparing the coast when it comes to skiing because I've had great experiences with both. Um, but yeah, kind of using that to breach into my outdoor activities. Our weather has been super sporadic. I think 2 weeks ago we had a day or two where the high was like 75, 76.
Oh wow.
Um, and then we had like today, I was driving in and the temperatures were below freezing again. I mean, we're into March now, and the temperatures just fluctuate all over the place with Georgia weather. And so we had our fake spring already, and so we were into like the 60s and 70s, and
Mhm.
the mornings are still pretty cold. I mean, at night times it'll get below freezing, and so the weather's been kind of sporadic. And well, that might be like it kind of makes outdoor sports unpredictable and a little bit
Yeah.
hard, right? So if you're kind of like starting to get used to this, not just like us but the fish are starting to get used to this kind of like 60, 70 degree weather,
Mhm.
and now all of a sudden you get like another chill that comes through and you're cold again for another couple of weeks, it makes things a little bit tricky to get out on the water and do a little bit of fishing. So the weather's been a little bit sporadic, which has made things a little bit tough. But we have had a chance on the weekends. Luckily, the weekend weather has been pretty nice, and so we've had a chance to be able to go out to a couple of parks by us, and we're really blessed that we've got a couple of kind of like really open field parks, and then we've got a couple of like jungle gyms and stuff, and we've got our kind of like town center that has probably 4 or 5 different like jungle gym
Nice.
apparatuses. It's got this like big open field that's in the middle, and it's actually open container, and so you can like get drinks and stuff from the restaurants, and kind of like be walking around the parks and stuff. And the weather's was nice enough for us to be able to kind of head out there, and that town green's really nice for us because we can kind of like keep our youngest one, our 6 month old,
Mhm.
in the stroller and be able to kind of like walk him around. And then our 3 year old just has an absolute field day going from one apparatus to the other, and she's getting involved into some gymnastics now, so it's fun seeing her get a little bit more daring. And we had a couple of our neighbors that were up in the area too that have young kids, so that was really fun. And we went to dinner around there. And then what was really cool, I know this isn't exactly outdoorsy stuff necessarily, our 3 year old has this little like Strider bike. Pat, I'm not
Mhm.
sure if you're familiar with these,
I
but
am.
they're basically like a little, for those listening at home, they're like a little bike that doesn't have the pedals,
Mhm.
and so it's designed to give any kid from like 2 years old up through like probably 4 or 5 that's kind of learning how to ride their bike, to give them a little bit of balance so that they can kind of like know what it's like to be kind of pushing off from one leg onto the other. And our my 3 year old had kind of been tinkering around with it every now
Mm-hmm.
and then, I guess you could say, but like never really took to it. But when we were going to dinner, she really was like pushing off. She even like glided around for a little bit,
Oh,
and it was
nice.
just really cool seeing her finally kind of like take to this take to this little like strider bike. So it's not exactly the what you consider outdoor sports, but it was definitely kind of like a proud dad moment to be able to see her kind of taking on kind of like a new challenge, and she was so proud of herself, and we were so
That's
proud of her
awesome.
too. So it was cool. It was fun. She definitely like came up to like a very quick and abrupt stop like right up to the back of the car, and I think I were worried that she was gonna like just go like full long her first time really riding right into the back bumper of our car, but we were able to stop her before that happened. But
Well,
but she had a blast, we had a blast, and so just a little bit of time getting outside was definitely great for everybody.
absolutely. Anytime you can get outside is a great time, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
for sure.
All right, great. Well, without further ado, let's get into some, spring prep. We'll do a little bit
Yeah,
of
let's do
fishing
it.
primer. We'll talk about, as we move through the fishing seasons, kind of what our plan is. But first, I want to go over a little bit of, hunting post season for me. So up here in Massachusetts, they do have, you're not supposed to keep your tree stands in the woods, all year round. You're supposed to pull them down. I think technically you're supposed to do it like after every 30 days or so.
Okay.
But ultimately, I mean, I think the kind of the idea is that you want to be pulling them out shortly after the season ends, right? You don't want that equipment in the woods like forever, basically. And
Is
people
that like a hard and
do.
fast rule? Will they end up kind of like enforcing that? Will there
I
be
don't know how
people that
much
come to
they.
kind
I
of
think
monitor it?
they could enforce it. I don't think they have. I mean, I know of a handful of tree stands that are in the woods that I don't think I've ever seen been taken down. So not really. I mean, it would be a lot of work for them to go through and pull those down, right? Probably
Yeah,
more work than it's worth. But technically, that is the letter of the law. So I try to stay by it.
yeah,
And ultimately, it's a good idea anyway. As tree stands, right? If you're leaving them in the tree for an extended period of time, the metal can break down, the straps can break down, so ultimately it becomes a safety issue if you're going to leave it
yeah,
in there for an extended period of time, right? Well, if you pull them down, you can take a look at your straps and the metal and stuff like that, make sure it's all good before you set it up the following year. Generally, it's going to be the safer choice.
yeah.
So I went in. Usually, because I got the two little ones, I'll get up super early, just like if I was getting ready to go hunt, right? So I'll get up at
Mhm.
5, get in there right as day's breaking, and start pulling stuff out of the trees. Dad did come in and help me out, which was nice.
Okay.
Got another another set of hands,
Yeah,
more or less to help me get stuff out of the woods, and keep me company. I mean, it's always nice to have
yeah,
another person, looking through the woods, looking at deer
yeah.
sign and stuff too.
Now, while you were doing this, did you have any either A, temptations to get in the stand and do any hunting, or B, did you have any or on the I guess on the other side of that where you and dad kind of just like chopping it up and talking with one another and went in the other direction where it's just like you know what? No, we're gonna go and we're not gonna make a hunting trip out of this. We're just gonna get our stuff down.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately the season's done in Massachusetts now, so we can't
Oh,
we
okay,
can't
yeah,
do
that's
any
right, that's
hunting
right.
up here right now. I mean, I think technically it might be rabbit. I think rabbit season might be in, and squirrel could be
Mm,
in, but not something that we're actively
right. Okay. Yeah,
pursuing
that
right
makes sense.
now, right? So yeah, it was really just to go in and get the gear out of the woods.
Yeah. I
But
guess you could kind of see whether there's deer around or
well,
anything like
yeah,
that,
and
but
that's the thing, right? So, I mean, ultimately, we trekked in there, and it was not. It wasn't too cold, which was nice. It was probably like 30, 40 degrees, which is, comfortable weather at this time of the year. But as far as the snow, right, we've had like 3 or 4 like small storms up here, all of which have had like probably like 5 inches of snow, right? But
that
all
would
that,
shut things
but
down here
yeah,
in
yeah, it
Georgia.
would.
We would be on
Oh
lockdown.
my god. But all nothing's melted because it's been really cold still, right?
Mhm.
So the woods had about the snow was like there was like about an inch of ice on top and then about a foot and a half of like powder underneath. So
Okay.
we were trekking through like a foot and a
Yeah.
half of snow,
Yeah.
getting to these tree stands, which I mean ultimately most of mine are, you'll walk down a path and then it's, a quarter mile, half mile into the woods off the path once you're there, right? So I mean it's not necessarily easy terrain, and then you add like a foot of snow on top of that, and it becomes even more challenging, right?
Yeah.
But we managed to get in there. We took the tree stands down. I have a handful of trail cameras in there as well. Pulled those down. Did a little bit of scouting around the woods because there's snow, right? You can very easily see if any deer have been through because their
Yeah.
tracks are going to be in the snow. We did see some kind of where I was expecting to see them, which was nice. In that area near the marsh that I was talking about in one of our earlier
Yep.
episodes.
Hmm.
There was some good deer sign over there. Some recent trails, some sign that the deer have been in there recently. And I actually managed to, because that area is so thick and hard to get to, I did take one of my cameras down and put it over there. So
Okay.
I have a camera set up, so next year I won't have to worry about getting one in there in the middle of the summer with all the leaves and branches and stuff like that. I should be
Yeah.
able to
Smart.
just pull the camera at the end of the season and get that information, which will be
Yeah,
super
that's smart.
helpful.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But it took probably I had 3 tree stands in there. Probably took about probably 3 hours or so to pull them all down, grab all the cameras,
Wow.
pack them all up, and bring them back to the car.
I mean,
So
that's a labor of love right there, considering you're not doing any hunting right
oh
now.
no,
This is
exactly.
all just getting the equipment out
Yeah,
of there.
it was like it probably I got in around 6. Yeah, it was about 6 to 8 to grab 2 of the stands, and I had to go back to the car, and then I had another stand that was had like about a 10-minute drive to get to the other one, and like
Okay.
between the drive and the pulling the last stand took like another hour or so. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it takes some time, but it did allow me to get the trail cameras, and it did allow me to see kind of what's going on right now in the woods, which can be beneficial as we move into the season, which is great.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, when have you had a chance to look at the cameras
I was just gonna get into that.
yeah.
Yes, I'd have. And there are some good deer on those cameras. There's
Okay.
one deer that I've been kind of chasing for the last couple of years who is a huge deer. He's got a really wide rack, really good tine length, and I didn't have any pictures of him this year, which is a little bit
What was
disappointing.
that length that you just said?
Tine length, yeah, just
Yeah,
basically
can you
how.
explain that again? I'm not new to hunting here, so not sure what that means.
Absolutely. So yeah, a wide rack, right, would just be kind of the width of the antlers on top of the deer's head. Generally speaking, if you're looking at a deer's antlers and you can see like their ears, right, you can use that as kind of a metric. If the rack is like past their ears, generally
Mm,
that means it's going to be wider than 12 inches, right? So the
okay.
inside spread is going to be greater than 12 inches, which generally means it's going to be a good sized buck, right?
Right.
And then I was referring to tine length. So, each of the deer's points are their tines, right?
Okay.
The longer the tines, generally the better the deer is, right? The more I don't know, more tine length, right? The
Yeah.
bigger the rack.
Now,
So
is that just simply by virtue of the fact that this is an older deer? It's had a chance to be able to get bigger through more years of growing, and thus we have like a larger specimen on our hands, or what all kind of constitutes like a good sized deer? Or I guess another way of putting it is, does a big rack on a deer always constitute a bigger older deer, or do you find that's not necessarily always one always leads to the other?
yeah, this is an excellent question. The answer is kind of. So in the New England area, generally speaking, the deer around here aren't known for having really large racks, right? You can have really, really big deer that don't necessarily have a big rack. There are certainly plenty that do, and
Mhm.
generally speaking, in the New England area, if you're seeing a deer that has a large rack, it's going to be an older deer.
Right.
Now there is a component of genetics that goes along with that, right? So
Okay.
deer, it's genetically based. So if a deer's dad had, a really big rack, it's very likely that that deer's son is also going to have a very big rack, right?
Hmm.
So it's kind of a combination of the genetic pool, the health of the deer, right? So if they had a really poor winter, they're really kind of struggling. Generally speaking, the next year, their rack is gonna be smaller. And it's something that I
Right.
mean, maybe not a lot of listeners may not know. Antlers fall off every year. They don't like
Right.
it's
Right.
not like they grow and grow and grow, and there are some animals that is the case. But for white-tailed deer, those antlers that you see on top of a deer grew all entirely that year. It started
Right.
they started in like probably the springtime. You start getting
Hmm.
little nubs, and like by the fall, you have full blown antlers on there, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing when you think about it. But that also, I mean, it contributes to that. It doesn't contribute to the health of the deer, but it's kind of like a statement of the health of the deer. And if they're not getting the nutrients they need, they can't
Yeah.
utilize that energy to grow a bigger rack, right? So it's kind
Hmm.
of that natural
This is your
selection, right?
biology
Yeah,
talking.
exactly, right. It's that natural selection, right? The does are gonna pick the deer that has the bigger rack sheerly from the sense that a bigger rack, generally speaking, means a healthier, more fit deer, survival of the fittest, right?
Right.
So that's generally how it works. Now there are areas of the country that have massive racks with smaller deer. You could have a 2-year-old deer that has a rack that's way bigger than anything in the New England area, and that's just genetics mostly, genetics and the
Yeah.
health of the deer population basically. So it's
Okay.
kind of both, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good deer in this area would be something in that yeah, something in that like 100, class. So that would be, if you were to measure the spread, as long as the points and stuff like that, you can add them all up. And that's how you would quote unquote score a deer rack.
Okay.
And anything in that range would be considered a pretty good, a really good deer for this area. So
Okay. Cool.
yeah. But yes, I did get a chance to pull those trail cameras. I did take a look at those pictures. Didn't have any like jumbo deer on there, but a lot of really good deer worth chasing as we move into next year. And I will say I got more pictures this year than I have in previous seasons, which is kind of exciting in its
Okay.
own way. More, ultimately I haven't started pooling that data yet and figuring out specifically what that information means, but the more pictures the better ultimately, more data points and more things to pull
Yeah.
together, so pretty exciting.
Yeah. It's like having fish on the fish finder. It's better than
Exactly.
not having fish on the fish finder. Yeah. Now,
Abs-
when you're kind of trying to figure out a spot to put up these cameras, do you have like criteria that you're looking for? And to what extent are those criteria the same as when you're looking for like a hunting spot? So I know that you're kind of like gathering data here, and so I would imagine that you would want to be putting these cameras in a location where you think that they're going to be kind of traveling throughout their time during the hunting season. So at the same time, that certainly is where you want to put your tree stand, right? Is where these deer are going to be traveling, where they're going to be when it's time to be hunting them. But what else kind of comes into play when it comes to these cameras? Are you looking for a spot that has like a really easy access point in terms of being able to get in there? Are you looking for like a spot that's got that might be great for hunting, but ooh, it's kind of covered in brush, so that's not going to be a great camera spot. What's kind of coming into consideration when you're coming up with those spots?
yeah, so generally for me, I'll look for areas that are kind of near where I'm planning on hunting. So either areas that I am, either want to hunt in the next season, or that I am planning on hunting that season, so that I can get some data on how the deer are moving in that area, generally speaking. And sometimes it's not like right where I'm going to put my tree stand. It could be, a little bit off. Usually I'll try and put it near a scrape. So that's where the deers kind of pot up the ground in order to signal to other
Hmm.
deer. Those areas tend to be good places to put cameras because there's going to be a lot of deer traffic. And ultimately,
Hmm.
really what I'm looking for is lots of deer in the area. One, to get an idea of what deer are around. Are there a lot of deer around? And if there are there any big deer around, right?
Hmm.
So that's generally what I'm looking for when I'm putting up those cameras. As far
Yeah.
as like the
Yeah. No, that makes
specifics and
sense.
trees, it's really just making sure that there aren't any bushes or branches or anything in front of the camera that's gonna impact what the camera is actually viewing.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. But yeah, and then other than that, you know, for fishing wise, I don't have a lot of preseason fishing activities that I do. Generally,
Yeah.
my fishing preseason starts exactly one day before I'm gonna go fishing. I will
Yeah.
pull out
Yeah.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
rods and my tackle box and pretty much go from there. So,
Yeah.
I do plan doing a couple, not like trips, but there's a handful of times where I try and go fishing over the course of the year. But as far as the prep that goes along with it, there is virtually no prep
There's
coming from me.
very little
So,
prep. Yeah.
but Mike, moving into, you obviously do a handful of fishing. What does that look like for you as you start moving into the spring season? How do you start preparing for some fishing activities?
Yeah, so right now I'm kind of in the midst of it right now. I'll talk a little bit about kind of the way that I look at things over the course of a year a little bit later on in the podcast. But at this point, like I have the equipment that it is that I'm going to be using for my fishing. I have like the rods that it is that I'm going to be using. I have the line that I want to be using. I have the lures that I want to be using, and it's now kind of about for me working into my schedule when it is that that's going to be. Now, the nice thing is that unlike a hunting season, I don't have like strict parameters about when it is that I can go out there and when it is that I can't.
Hmm.
It's just more kind of based off of like comfort level and then also like success level, right? Like how like do I want to be out there in January, out on the like January, February when it's like below freezing
Hmm.
and no, I mean the answer is no, Matt. I don't want to be out there on the water when it's that cold. And so kind of like the what days am I going to be able to make my way out there with the equipment that I kind of already have squared away and ready to go. Now you're kind of laughing and saying that like your prep work takes place like the day before, but honestly, I have found like as the years have gone on that that night before is so important in like getting everything ready, testing your line, testing your knots, making sure that your lures are ready to go, making sure that you're as I've said so many times, like I do a lot of kayak fishing and making sure that if I'm taking out like my bigger 8 foot, that it's up on top of the car already, that I have the like the straps tightened down so that I'm not wasting that time that I would otherwise be like getting out on the water fiddling with my equipment and getting things packed up the morning of. So I know that you're kind of joking about that night before being kind of when your prep work starts, but that is so important to be able to get that stuff ready to go so that you can get an early jump. Nothing's more frustrating than when you get up early and then this, that, and the other is going wrong with the tie on your kayak. And so you
Hmm.
pull out of the driveway and things are shifting more than you feel comfortable with. And now you're not actually getting onto the water when you want to. So for me right now, like I've got my equipment squared away and ready to go. As I'm going into this season, I've got a couple of rods that I'm going to be using. I've got some new line that I'm looking forward to trying.
Oh,
That's kind of like a tangle free line that my father-in-law has put me onto.
now
Um,
I have a question. Did he get you a tangle-free line because you've habitually been tangling up your line?
no, not necessarily. I think for it was actually kind of like a price point for him. He was going online and trying to find some reliable, sturdy, good fishing rods for the grandkids
Hmm.
because he's got so many grandkids and he wants to be able to bring them out fishing when they're coming in when they're coming up to the lake. And so he went online and got like a handful. I think it was for two of the grandsons, got a couple of like age appropriate, but like also good durable rods. And with
Hmm.
those, he wanted to get some good solid lines. So he did a little bit of research, and he found this very inexpensive like tangle free line.
Ooh.
And so he was trying it with me a couple of days before the grandkids were going to be using it, and he was like, "This is great." The way that it's casting, the way that I mean, it really is kind of tangle free. It's like it's a different composite, and so I'm looking forward to trying it. The I do so much like a lot of the casting and stuff that it is that I'm doing is it's just like it's not that far. It's like 25 yards or so. It's not all that it's not all that far. And so like and that would be kind of like pressing it too
Hmm.
in terms of kind of like distance for a cast and so for me it's less about kind of like the frequency of the tangling and more about kind of the Well, I mean, the casting sometimes can get a little bit tangled up, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you get that little bit of like a knot or like a hitch in your line, it doesn't matter that the rest of your line isn't tangled. If you got like a little bit of a bunch, or heaven forbid you get yourself like a bird's nest inside of your spool, inside
Ooh.
of your reel, then when you're trying to cast, it ends up hitching on that cast, and
Mm-hmm.
what would have otherwise been like a 25-yard cast, now all of a sudden you're looking at maybe 15 yards,
Mm-hmm.
and that right there is going to inhibit your ability to be able to catch fish. So I find myself getting more frustrated, less with like the tangles and more so with the inhibition that it ends up putting on my casting. And it, from what it was that I was using last summer, it did cast really well.
That's good.
And so it's I'm kind of excited to try that out. And I've got the one kayak that's the 8 foot that it's it's small by way of kayaks, but it's still heavy, and it's still a bear. And so over the course of the fall, I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but I bought another inflatable kayak. Now
Okay.
I've had my fair share. I've had my fair share of struggles with inflatable kayaks. I think that I've got like three of them at this point, and every one of them has punctured. But this is a new brand; it's a new type, so I'm looking forward to giving a new inflatable kayak a try. Um, and
Well, I
then
like that optimism, Mike.
Yes. Listen, it's still beginning of March right now, Pat. That's why I'm able to be optimistic like this. But I've got some equipment, but for the most part, as I'm looking at kind of like the start of the spring season, which for me is kind of like the reset. For as a teacher, everything resets in the fall. F. Scott Fitzgerald has a great line about how the world and how everything kind of resets every time when the fall rolls around, and that's definitely true for teachers. For fishermen, it's kind of, for me at least, it's in the springtime that things kind of reset. And so I've got my equipment that I'm excited about, and so I've got my lures, my lines, and everything ready to go. And I'm looking at I went actually today to see how many kind of like personal days that I've taken. I get 4 as a teacher over the course of the year that I can take, just personal days, and I haven't taken any yet. So I was ecstatic to see that, because that means that I've got some fishing ahead of me. So
Nice.
I'll be taking a couple of days here and there. Now, as a teacher, again, it's going to have to work in with my schedule. When can I have, like, when's it going to work in terms of not giving tests, quizzes, like
Mm-hmm.
what's it going to look like in terms of my curriculum, and then what's it going to look like in terms of when are my classes meeting. I don't necessarily want to take a day where so few of my classes are meeting, because that's essentially like a work day for me already. I don't have to like be in the classroom teaching
Yeah.
as much. But then if I pick a day where all of my classes are meeting, now I have to come up with all of these sub plans and everything. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of this delicate balance of finding the right day that kind of works with the curriculum. And so I'm looking at as early as maybe like March 19th,
Ooh.
to try and get myself out on the water. And if I take a personal day, I'm gonna wanna take the day and make my way up to, it would probably be Lake Lanier. For the first one, I wanna kind of get some fish in the boat, and there's a couple of spots that I know about, and a couple of spots that I wanna kind of explore that are around my same launch point, that I'm definitely looking forward to. So.
Nice. Now, when you're like exploring a new spot, do you have
Mhm.
like a set of lures, or like do you go like in an order in order to try and figure out like what is going to like catch fish, or do you like always go with the same one, or like different ones for different times a year? How do you
Yeah,
like, is there like a
it
progression that you work through? How does that work?
kind of, I mean, that's a great question, and it kind of is always dependent, at least for me, on what it is that I'm seeing, right, and what it is that I'm trying to do. And so for me, it's less of a like a set series where I must use this lore and then this lore and then this lore, and it's more about what it is that I'm seeing and where it is that I'm seeing it. So if I'm coming up on an area that has kind of like a shallower spot, a shallower like plateau, let's say, that gets as shallow as like 2 or 3 feet. I'm not going to want to be casting into that my really deep diver that I use behind my kayak for a lot of trolling and for a lot of casting into areas that are like 14 or 15 feet deep, because I know that I'm going to end up losing that, or I'm going to end up with 15 minutes where I'm trying to like get this thing off of the bottom of that area where fish are going to be jumping all around me and I'm not going to be able to get my line in the water. Right.
Right.
So like it depends on kind of where it is on the lake that I'm seeing it. If I'm over by kind of like a coastal area that I know is like has like a steep enough drop off to be able to take like a sizable lure, and I'm seeing fish that are kind of like jumping around this area, I'm going to throw one of the whopper ploppers in there and I'm going to see if I can get a surface hit off of something where I know that they're already surface feeding in a shallow area, and I'm very likely to get a kind of a territorial fish to come out of the coast and end up hitting that line. Uh, Always when I'm kind of making my way out to an area, I have my trolling lures that I
Hmm.
like using, which are a lot of those Rapala. I think did I ever end up sending you that link, Pat,
Yeah, you did.
to the Rapala bait?
I read through
Uh,
it.
yeah, so there's that bait that I really like. It's got that really big nose on it that ends up diving down pretty deep to like it'll get as deep as like 10 to 15 feet when I'm trolling, when I'm kind of like making my way to an area. So I got a couple of lures that I like to use. Um, and then if there's kind of like a really deep pocket or a really deep pool that I want to be using, I see something on the fish finder, let's say that these fish are down at like 20 feet and they're all feeding down there, and I've got just like this feeding frenzy that's going on right underneath my kayak. I'm going to try and use kind of like a deeper lure.
Hmm.
I'm going to use kind of a sinking lure, probably get that thing a couple of feet off of the bottom and then bring it up in increments and see if I can catch one of these fish at one of those depths that I'm seeing on the fish finder. So for me it's a lot more about kind of like what it is that I'm seeing, and rather than kind of like going through a set trajectory, because I don't want to be, if what it is that I'm seeing is surface hits,
Hmm.
I don't want to be in that same area, kind of like putting a lure down to the bottom of the lake and
Yeah.
reeling it up a couple of times and trying to end up, and I'll end up with a catfish in my boat, you know, and when I'm trying to get one of those nice spotted bass that are so much fun to catch. So for me, it's a lot more about kind of like what it is that I'm seeing, and then also at the same time wanting to kind of like explore a little bit about these lures, and I want to do a little bit more of some of those surface hits, or
Hmm.
I want to get there's some like really lightweight lures that I have that are almost kind of like imitating like little like skitter bugs that would be like on the top of
Oh,
the
cool.
water. So if I'm seeing some like surface hits that are and there's a lot of activity that's kind of like at the top of the water, maybe I'll try and kind of like toss one of those out there. Now those do not cast very far,
Hmm.
and so you're doing a lot of kind of work with that line on the top of the water. Not obviously not like to the extent of doing like fly fishing,
Hmm.
but it's kind of like it's supposed to be imitating the same thing. So
Similar.
you're doing a lot of work with that lure on the top of the water in order to try and catch that fish, which I have very little experience with.
Hmm.
But it's something that I want to kind of add to my repertoire. So that would be also something that I'm trying to factor in is kind of like what it is that I want to do in terms of this fishing. Now, for the most part, I'm going to kind of pick my spots based off of what it is that I want to be doing. And it's all driven by where the fish are, right? So if I'm seeing fish that are jumping, that's where I want to be. And so even if I'm like trolling through an area and I see fish jumping, that's when I want to grab that other line and try and hit it. So I know that this was kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but that's kind of the gist of it when it comes to me.
No, that really covers it. That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, if you're seeing, top water hits, you want to be using top water lures, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And so I guess the other thing that I haven't really touched on as much in terms of kind of like this preseason planning is I've talked about it on previous episodes, but I really want to get fishing out on the Chattahoochee River. The Chattahoochee is a beautiful river. It's got great fishing. I've gone out with some buddies. This was a number of years ago that did a little bit of fishing out on the Chattahoochee, but I've never got a line in the water. And so now that I've been doing a little bit more fishing, I wanna fish the Chattahoochee. And so one thing that I need to do as I'm as I'm kind of prepping this spring, is one of those days. Pat, it's funny that we were talking about skiing and snowboarding earlier on because I almost see it as the same for me. I can ski, I can, but I love snowboarding, and I'm a lot more advanced as a snowboarder, and so the whole mountain is open to me as a snowboarder, and I don't feel as comfortable going down some of those black diamonds and skis
Hmm.
as I do on snowboard. And I love snowboarding, and I have so much fun when I'm out there snowboarding. And so it's almost like one of those things where any day that I go out there and I'm skiing, I'm not snowboarding, and I lose a
Hmm.
day snowboarding that day that I'm out there skiing.
Yep.
Well, I'm kind of considering like lake fishing and river fishing the same way. I really want to get out there on the river and fish the Chattahoochee,
Hmm.
but if I do, it's one day that I'm not lake fishing, and I have
Right.
so much more experience lake fishing that I can't. I'm worried that I'm going to head out there onto the river and I'm not going to end up catching anything. And I'm going to be kicking myself the whole time, being like, darn it, if I was just on the lake, I would have been boating dozens of fish, right? That's not the case. I wouldn't be boating dozens of fish. But still at the same time, it's kind of like that grass is greener type of a
Totally.
situation.
But
So,
that would still be a success in my opinion, right? I mean,
yeah,
honestly, I think that, you got to kind of gate, and we'll talk little bit about goals as we move through, but I mean, that's I would still gauge that as a success because you're fishing
yeah,
an area you've never fished before, and you're getting that experience, and that experience in some ways is invaluable because now instead
yeah.
of, having zero experience on that river, you have a little bit, which I think is ultimately a benefit there.
Yeah, and especially because it's a lot of new, right?
Mhm.
It's going to be a lot of new lures. I can't rely on my deeper sinking lures. I can't rely on the way that I've been catching a lot of fish, which is kind of like trolling along the shallows of like a lake, or kind of like the coast along kind of like a lake and looking for some of those spots to be cast fishing. The it's also like different water, and so it's different fish, different kind of like techniques, and most importantly it's different water. I'm going to be out there on moving water trying to keep myself kind of like steady in the like on the like in the kayak, and at the
Mhm.
same time still be doing fishing. And so I know that if my experience taking out like my new equipment even out onto a lake that I was familiar with the area was going to be as troubling and troublesome to me, to the point that I ended up in the lake within the first 10 minutes trying to retrieve my pole. You can listen back to a former episode to hear that story. But I think you're right, Pat. It's gonna be a lot of new, and even just getting out there and making my way through those frustrations. I'm gonna learn a lot that first trip out there, even if I don't end up catching a fish. So it's new, which is a little bit kind of scary to me, but it's definitely something that I'm excited for. So I need to decide on my entry point,
Mhm.
and I have a couple of them that I'm considering. They're all kind of probably within a couple of miles of one another, but the good news is that they're all very close to my house.
That's good.
So I don't have to take a 50-minute drive to get myself to a spot. I'm gonna be the all three. There's three spots that I'm really considering, that I'm excited to kind of like explore and get out into, and the I really do think that the just being able to get out there is going to be kind of like the goal, and that should be it.
Yeah,
And if I end up like every step along the way that's a little bit more advanced than that is going to be even better. uh,
absolutely.
but but deciding on that entry point is still something that I'm doing now, and that's still part of this kind of like spring fishing decision making,
Mhm.
that I'm kind of in the midst of right now in terms of preseason before I actually end up on the Chattahoochee River.
Yeah, so paint me a picture for a second. I'm obviously not from Georgia. I know that I've heard of the Chattahoochee River, but I don't know. Is this a big river? Are we talking like the Mississippi? Are we talking like the Merrimack up here is obviously a good sized river? Are we talking like, just like a smaller kind of river? I mean, I don't know. What does the Chattahoochee look like, especially in the area that you're planning on fishing it?
Great question. And so it is It is it's not the Mississippi. Let me just start right there. It is not the Mississippi River, but it is kind of like a great like water source that cuts through kind of like the North Georgia area, right through kind of like the North Georgia mountains, and it ends up kind of like winding and tucking and turning, and there are spots of it that are quite wide. There are spots of it that get kind of like very narrow and very shallow, and there are kind of like these pockets all along the way that are kind of all in between. I think the Merrimack River is probably the closest equivalent in terms
Okay.
of like size, but even the Merrimack River has parts that I think get wider and more open than the Chattahoochee does.
Mm-hmm.
What's nice about the Chattahoochee is that it winds its way through kind of like the Georgia wilderness. And what's a little bit different about that is when you're kind of following the Merrimack River, it'll make its way from Newburyport up through Ipswich. It'll go all the way through the Merrimack Valley, kind of coming in all the way up in New Hampshire, if I'm not mistaken. It'll kind of like and then
It's
wind
close to
its
New
way
Hampshire.
down
It's
through.
right at Salisbury Beach is where it makes its way back
Okay.
to the ocean. So
Okay, so kind of like we're right in that kind of
yeah.
where New Hampshire and Massachusetts are meeting, but
Mm-hmm.
but the Merrimack River kind of has it's a lot more open, and the Merrimack River doesn't have kind of like the wilderness necessarily that it ends up winding through the same way that and I say wilderness that's kind of a too dense of a term even for what it is, but like it's wooded area that it's winding through, and so you'll find these little like coasts and pockets and holes, and it's the area just is born for fishing. And so you can find yourself some like open areas. You can find yourself these little like crevices that are these basically these little like fishing nooks that'll have these really great fish. And there's overhanging trees which are going to be dropping grub and are going to be providing
Mm-hmm.
shade, and there are parts of it that are very slow moving. There are parts of it that are extremely fast moving, so much so that, and this is probably a tale for another podcast, but so much so that like my friends and I one night when we were like one evening into the night ended up actually tipping our canoe, the three of us,
Oh
when we were
no.
in a canoe, and the water was moving fast, and we were caught in an undertow, and I mean it was those waters were surging. And so in a lot of ways it's the kind of the speed of the river can be dependent on some of the weather leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a storm that's going to end up adding more water to the river, and you're getting kind of like the opening up of those floodgates and those dams, there's a chance that the Chattahoochee River could be really moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of factors that kind of go into kind of what makes it this like very unique and awesome, but also really great river for fishing. So
Nice. That's great. Very
yeah,
good.
so ultimately for this entry point, I'm looking for something that's going to allow for me to. I don't want the waters to be moving too like briskly. I also don't want it to be too shallow. I'm looking for kind of like an open. I'm looking for like a spot that I can almost treat like a gently moving lake.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I'm not looking for something as wide as like even like a Lake Lanier or anything like that. I'm looking for kind of like a gently moving to keep myself kind of like is as close to in one spot as I can, but then also like and also deeper. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be like getting myself caught in like in the underbrush or like the rocks and stuff like that, that's at the bottom of this river. I want it to be something that's a little bit on the deeper side. So it's a little bit of some insight into what it is that I'm looking for.
Nice. So then I guess as we move into like spring and into early summer, I mean, I know personally for me, I do want to try and get out there and do a little bit of fishing. I don't have a ton of opportunities to do that, but I know every year we try and do some amount of camping up in New Hampshire. Now this kind of goes early summer into the summer, but we'll usually try and take a trip up to the White Mountains, do some camping with the girls. We have gone camping a few times. The first time was just with my oldest when my
Hmm.
youngest wasn't born yet, and that was okay. We chose a place that was close to home in case it was a disaster. Most of the camping
Yeah.
experience was pretty good, but then our oldest ended up having some night terrors overnight, so it
Oh,
ended up
goodness.
be leading to a an evening that was a little bit less than ideal.
Yeah.
So so we ended up, we toughed it out through the night, but we decided to pack up and head out the next day and forego the second evening at the tent site for that one. But not last year, but the year before, we went camping with some friends, also with some little ones as well, and that actually ended up really fun. We got the tent set up. The girls really did great this time. No night terrors. Both girls slept well. They were exhausted from being outside, and we actually managed to get out in a canoe with the little ones as well, which was kind of fun
Nice.
to get them out on the water, get them that experience canoeing on a lake. I mean, they lasted probably about 30 minutes of canoeing, and then they were like, "All right, we're ready to go." But it was fun. It was fun to get them out there. And then this last past year, we were planning on going camping, but then it was going to be really stormy, so we decided instead of being wet and miserable the whole time, we just canceled
Yeah.
the camping and chose to
Yeah.
do something else. But if we
Probably for the best.
exactly, we don't need miserable children in
No.
tents. That's not a recipe for success there.
No. No,
Um,
certainly not.
yeah, but if we make it up to New Hampshire this in early summer, I'm hoping to find either like some small streams or a little lake that I can take the girls to, get them to flick the rod into the water, see if we can catch anything really. If we were to catch any sort of fish like with the girls fishing, it'd be super successful.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can make something like that happen.
Yeah.
And we, along with we took that canoe out for that one time we went camping, but we actually have a canoe here, and I live right nearby a lake. So I'm also hoping to potentially in the early summer get the girls in our canoe down at the lake, just get them out on the water, and
Yeah.
just to be able to be out on the water, maybe put a rod in, see if there are any fish that are looking particularly hungry. If not,
Yeah.
just being on the water with the girls, getting them in the canoe, that would be super successful for us as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
that's kind of
I've got
what our early spring is looking like. But what about
I've
you?
got a similar yeah, I've got a similar goal when it comes time to be talking about the summertime because that's when I really want to not our 6 month old, he's still too young, but getting the 3 year old out there onto the canoe, not into the kayak. That would be a little bit too much, I think. But the we've got a canoe up at the lake house that is, gosh, I want to say, it might be 16 feet.
Hmm.
No, that feels a little bit long. It's probably closer to like 12. But there's like a 12-foot canoe that we've got. Actually, I'm saying that it's probably right in the middle. It's probably like 14 feet. But being able to like get the my 3 year old out there. I brought her out there last year and she loved it. She loved being out there with
Nice.
me. And so what I did is I just put the trolling line in and I just kind of like paddled around
Yeah.
and I was like, if this thing hits, I've got a fisherman with me now. I've got a fishing buddy.
Exactly.
But of course it didn't hit anything when we were trolling around because the it wasn't fishing time, right?
Yeah.
I'm out there at like noon,
Mm-hmm.
like you're very, especially on a busy lake, on a
Right.
busy lake weekend, right? It's in the middle of the summer. I mean, it's just
Mm-hmm.
all the factors are against it, but still I have that optimism that I'm going to be able to catch something
Absolutely.
with her in the canoe. But for me, for my fishing in the spring, now that I know that I have 4 personal days, I wanna take all 4 personal days, and hopefully I can get out there on the water for all 4 of them.
Nice.
I do need to decide over the course of this spring which kayak it is that I'm going to end up bringing up to the lake. Now, admittedly, the inflatable one would be much easier to bring up to the lake. Um, but I wanna make sure that because the lake during the summer for that like 2.5 to 3 week period is when I do so much of my fishing, and I really look forward to it every year. I don't want to be up there with a kayak that's going to end up bursting a hole the like second week, and then or like the second time that I'm trying to bring it out, and now I'm up there without any sort of like kayak to be able to bring out on the water. Yes, I can bring out the canoe, and that's what I would end up doing. But I want to bring up something that's going to be reliable. But also, if it ends up being really successful, then
Hmm.
maybe I bring the kayak, my 8 foot kayak, up to the lake, and I leave that up there, and then that becomes what it is that I take up and off of the water for my time when I'm up there. So I've got a decision to make in terms of which kayak to bring up. There's kind of pros and cons packing wise to both. The 8 foot goes on top of the car,
Hmm.
which is a little bit of a hassle to be bringing up the long drive up to Lake Kiwi. But the inflatable is going to take up a little bit of room in the car, but not too much room, not something that I certainly wouldn't be able to manage. But I got to decide on my kayak and which one I'm going to be bringing up to the lake. As I was saying before, I really want to get on the Chattahoochee this spring, and if I can, I'm going to be far from perfecting any sort of technique of river fishing, but if I can at least get out onto the river like this spring, then I'll be able to have the experience, and I'll be able to just do a little bit better in the fall time, because the fall time it gets a little bit tricky to try and get all the way up to the lakes, for some of those, like those few and far between fishing outings that I
Hmm.
can have. So if I can get out and kind of make the springtime some more of my lake fishing, and the fall time a little bit more of my river fishing, then I might be seeing a little bit of success there. And then I want to get out to Lanier, somewhere else besides Lanier for some of these 3 to 4 trips. Now, even as I'm saying that, I'm thinking to myself, there's so many spots in Lake Lanier that I could try, but uh,
Hmm.
and so maybe even if I'm not veering from Lake Lanier, because it's so close and it's so much nicer than having to spend that extra 30 minutes. It's either 30 minutes more of sleep or 30 minutes of not fishing,
Yeah.
that when I'm going up to Lake Hartwell. But there's a couple of new spots in Lake Lanier that I do want to give a try to, and so again, that's the difference of just like a different launch point. And now all of a sudden I'm fishing in an entirely new spot. So getting into some new spots is kind of a goal of mine for the spring as well.
Nice. So yeah, after the spring, we move into the summer. Now I have a handful of opportunities that I usually have as we move into the summer. My family will take a week and we'll spend it up in York, Maine. When we do that, we have the opportunity to do some casting off the banks right into one of the bays near Nubble Light, which is habitually a pretty good area to be fishing. There's always fishermen out on the rocks casting into the water, so I'm usually in pretty good company. I've caught a handful of stripers off there. I usually can't put as much time into fishing as I'd like. Usually only able to get out in like 2 or 3 mornings and 2 or 3 evenings for like an hour or so each. But
Yeah.
getting out is certainly better than not. But I've caught I think I've caught 3 stripers over the time there, which is pretty good for me, with that minimum amount of time. I've caught one on a popper. It's a top water setup. Bouncing that jig over the top of the water, kind of making that pop noise that the fish hit, which was pretty cool. I've caught one on a bucktail, which is kind of like a weighted hook with like kind of a fish. It's usually white with like some like white like horsehair or whatever hanging off the back, basically.
Okay.
So when it swims
Yeah.
through the water, it kind of looks like a small white fish, right? But it's
Okay.
heavy, so it sinks down, so you like really quickly. So it allows you to kind of fish the weeds, and if any are
Huh.
fish that are kind of like down there, it's tricky, right? Because you got to find that depth that it's like low enough that the fish are gonna hit it, but not
Yeah.
so low that you're dragging it through the weeds and it's getting caught on
Mhm.
stuff the whole time. So it's kind of a little tricky in that regard, but I have had success with that. And then
Yeah.
also I've recently also used some frozen mackerel. So I'll
Yeah.
basically rig up some frozen mackerel, throw it out with a bobber, and then just wait and see if anything is hungry. And that one, the first time I used bait, I actually rigged it up that way, and I think it was my second cast that I caught a fish on it, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is it. And then like
Yeah.
I haven't had as much success with it after that, but
Yeah.
it looked like it was gonna be the way to go for a little bit there. So it was
That bucktail lure is what I like to call an Icarus lure. So if you're familiar with the story of
yes.
Icarus, flying too close to the sun,
Oh
right?
yeah.
It's kind of like with those lures, and I would put my lure that I really like in that same category, where it's like it's kind of like more of a floating lure, so left to its own devices is going to end up kind of like making its way up to the
Hmm.
surface. Or if it's weighted, it's very low weight. It's certainly not going to be like dropping
Yeah.
down as soon as it hits the water. But it has that deep diver on it too, so like you're not going to be catching anything if you're kind of skimming along the surface of the water, but then you also got to kind of be dangerous because if it'll dive down deep enough that if you're
Hmm.
not careful, you're going to end up in the reeds. So you got to kind of like play that Icarus game with it, where you don't want to fly too close to the sun. You got
Yep.
to kind of like keep it right in that middle. And so that's interesting though, that it's trying to imitate like a whitefish, because you guys get a lot more whitefish up north than we do down here. So that's what I kind of love about kind of like the lure selection, right? Is that you're picking what it is that you know the fish are going to be eating based off of like their food supply, based
Yeah.
off of the different fish that are going to be there. And so while that lure might be wildly successful for you, it probably wouldn't work as super well down here for me. But at the same time, there's still lures that I use that are trying to kind of like accomplish the same goal. It's just a different type of fish that it is that it's trying to
Yeah,
imitate.
different fish, different environment. I mean, this area in particular, the last few years has been really seaweedy,
Hmm.
which has been a challenge in and of itself. I basically have to fish it at the right tides, otherwise I just get covered with seaweed pretty much every
Yeah.
cast, which is no fun. Um,
That's
but
that's another level that kind of like goes on into the timing of it too, right? It's like it's
mhm,
not even like the time of the year, it's not even the time of the day. Now you have to factor in
tides,
the tide as well,
yeah,
which is something that
which
fortunately I don't have to worry as much about with lakes and rivers.
Yeah, and that is something that we're only up in York for like a week, so it's the challenge of gauging the right tide, the right time for me to be able to get out there, right? Because I can only usually either do like the morning or the afternoon,
Yeah,
and for like only like an hour or so. And if the tide's not right, then it's like, well, I may as well not be out there, if I'm just gonna be
right.
bouncing my lure over the seaweed. There's no
Yep.
reason for
Mhm.
me to be out there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tricky, but I'm always excited to get out there, and I usually get a couple days with the good tides that work out pretty well for what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
that's always exciting. And this year, my oldest daughter, she's showed an interest in fishing a little bit, so we're hoping to maybe be able to get out to the beach and do some surf casting, and maybe do that
Yeah.
like over dinner, for lack of a better idea. Basically,
Yeah.
get a pizza, hang out on the beach for a little bit, throw some bait over into the breakers, and see if there's any stripers that are hungry, and see if we can
Yeah.
catch anything that way. And kind of excited to see if we can make that happen this summer as
Mhm.
well, because I think that would be a lot of fun. Even if the girls aren't paying attention to the fishing, that they'll be excited to be on the beach at a time they're
Yeah.
usually not.
Yeah.
Eating
Yeah. Yeah.
eating dinner, on the beach is always kind of exciting for them. So
Oh, that sounds
I think
awesome.
that would be cool. And then other than that, I don't have a lot of fishing lined up for the summer. There is a little pond that's like down the street from my work, which
Hmm.
occasionally during a lunch, or like if I can get off work early on a Friday, I'll hop down there. It's like literally a mile away from my office. And it doesn't have a ton of, well, it has a handful of fish. There's usually actually a lot of people over there, but there's not a lot of big fish over there.
Yeah.
Um, which is neither here nor there.
Hmm.
It does get stocked with trout though, which is kind of cool, because
Hmm.
like there you can see them sometimes, the trout kind of swimming around in there, so they're definitely in there.
Yeah.
But usually a month or two after the stocking, most of the stocked fish have been fished out, because
Yeah.
folks will go in there and just fish it really hard until it's mostly rainbow trout, so which is a
Hmm.
real good eating. So
Yeah.
they'll fish it pretty hard, and then there aren't as many in there.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of bluegill, for if you're just looking to catch like a sunfish or something, get something on the line. Those guys are pretty easy to
Hmm.
catch. I've caught a couple like small bass in there as well. Some like largemouth, and then
Hmm.
I saw a giant carp in there. Like, I'm talking
Okay.
like 2 feet, like
Wow.
huge carp. And I've never caught carp before, so I don't even know. Evidently, they're bottom feeders. I would
Yeah.
imagine kind of similar to like a catfish, but I, I,
Hmm.
I looked up a little bit, like, how do you catch a carp? There's like these like dough ball, like good size like inch round dough balls that you can use and like on a hook,
Yeah,
and they'll evidently eat those. I
sounds
mean
very
the
similar to catfish.
yeah,
Yeah,
but this thing was huge. I threw my lure at it a few times, but it had
yeah,
like absolutely no interest in it. So,
yeah, yeah.
so maybe one
You
of
got
these
that
days
huge
I'll.
for a reason,
Yeah,
Pat.
exactly. So maybe one of these days I'll, catch one of those guys. But the benefit there is that it's, right down the street from my work. If I have a little bit of free time, I can
Mhm.
make my way down there, and maybe I will this summer, which would be
Yeah.
pretty exciting. But moving into the summer, what does your fishing look like? What are your kind of plans for that?
Yeah, so for me, we'll obviously take that family trip up to Lake Kiwi. We'll be around the family, which is so much fun. I look forward to that trip every year. Similar to your trip up to York Beach, it's just so awesome being able to be up there with family and everything. And so I want to take like about 10 mornings or so to go out onto the lake and do some fishing. And that would be roughly like every other morning that I'm there. Now with our It's going to depend on our 6 month old and our 3-year-old's sleep entirely, whether or not I'm able to get out there that frequently. But I'm hopeful, and again, it's beginning of March, so I can afford the liberty of being optimistic in this regard. But I'm looking to get out there for like, if I could get out there for double digit mornings, I mean that would be an awesome summer.
For sure.
Um, I don't know if that's going to be able to be the case, but for 10 mornings would be stellar. And so I want to not just fish the point. There's this point. It's been called in the family now Mike's Point, because it's where I troll right there, and I'll spend the first part of like 5:45 until 6:15, and I will be on that point, and it is like appointment television. That is where I'm going to be. But I want to. There's this. It's a little more than a mile from kind of the from the lake house, which is well within like what I'll end up paddling over the course of a morning.
Right.
But I need to kind of like string it together to go to this overpass that's kind of like down along the way. It's actually where I caught my first fish on Lake Kiwi.
Oh,
Was kind of
cool.
like going in and out. I caught this. It was not super big, maybe like 11, 12 inch spotted bass, off of the back of my father-in-law's old fishing boat, right over by that overpass. And I mean, from that point on, the fish was hooked and I was hooked. So I want to get down to that overpass in some of the mornings, because I mean, I catch the most fish on that point,
Hmm.
because that's where I'm spending the most time between 5:45 and 6:15, or 6:30, is on that point. And so I know that I can catch fish like in other spots, but like when I'm being when I maybe if I have a couple of mornings where I'm not catching fish on that point, maybe I'll muster up the courage to kind of like troll my way down to that overpass, and do a little bit of fishing down there, because there's good fishing down there. And the for all the reasons that I've talked about already,
Hmm.
shade and the depth and the drop offs, and I mean that it's just a really great spot. I do want to take out the my 3-year-olds out onto some fishing, hopefully on pops. That's what they call my father-in-law, out onto his boat, but then also out on the canoe. The canoe, I get to basically have the freedom of being able to take my daughter out kind of like wherever it is that I want to go. And
Hmm.
for those, like maybe I'll have the line in the water for half the time, but really I'm just kind of looking to kind of like be out on the water and safely be able to be out there in the canoe.
Yeah.
That is kind of what I'm looking for. And then we'll always take a trip out to Hartwell, which is about an hour or so from the launch point that we go to with the guide. Is out on Lake Hartwell, and I always go on that trip, and I'm excited and ecstatic to catch all the fish that I'm able to catch. But I'm looking to kind of like pick up a couple of pointers from this guide that is phenomenal at what it is that he does. And I've kind of been able to kind of pick up things here and there, and he's always got his secrets that he's never going to share. But there's things like there's a lot of osprey that'll kind of like that'll be flying around in the area, and he'll like track an osprey. He'll like follow an osprey and see where it is that they're diving down into,
Hmm.
and then follow that bird right to a fishing spot, and then we'll catch 10 to 15 fish right in that spot. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is it's he's like following the signs of nature, and that's part of what it is that I want to be able to do. Now, obviously, being in a kayak, I don't have the ability to be able to kind of like on a whim just like make my way out, even like a half mile to a different part of the lake because I see a bird that's diving
Yeah,
down into the
that
water.
that bird's gonna be much faster than you, moving across
Absolutely,
that lake in your
absolutely. Of
kayak.
course it is. Of course it is. So like things like that osprey spotting, like what it is that he's looking for in kind of like a good spot. Because I know what I'm looking for, but like is he looking for surface breaks? Is he like what's he looking for in terms of landscape? These are questions that I'm Pat, I'm literally gonna come with like a moleskin notepad. I'm gonna have my questions, and I'm not gonna leave until I at least have the like muster up the courage to be able to ask him these like a couple of questions that I have about some of the spotting and stuff that it is that he's doing. But I don't want to like that we've established this not just this kind of like fish this like guide relationship, but he's kind of become like a family friend at this point. He's got two kids that are within like a month each of them of my 3 year old and my 6 month old,
Oh, that's
and
great.
so like we're in a very similar spot in life. He is such a good fisherman that I have to think that I can kind of garner a little bit of knowledge off of this guy. And I mean, I do not believe that there's a single thing that I could tell him that he doesn't already know about fishing.
Yep,
But still, like that kind of that back and forth and kind of learning from him is something that I'm looking forward to for the summer. So.
absolutely. Very good. Well, moving into the fall, I know personally I end up doing very little fishing in the fall, and mostly that's because any free time that I have is going to be spent in the woods. As we move into fall, I think middle of September is usually when hunting season comes in New Hampshire, and then followed by Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts runs all the way to the end of the year. So basically, any time between September and the end of the year is time spent hunting for me, not really fishing. But for you, Mike, as you move into the fall, kind of what changes? Is it a lot of the same for you, or is it a lot? Are there any changes that you make, either where you're fishing or kind of with the equipment you're utilizing?
Yeah, so for me, like the fall season, it's still a spawning season. So there's still great fish to be had in the fall. And so for me, it's not when I do the most fishing, but it is when you can still get a lot of really good fishing done. So for me, I kind of like when I'm making my way into the fall, I'm like using this as an opportunity to kind of reassess the spring and the summer season, what has worked, what hasn't worked, especially when it comes to equipment. And so I end up making some of my bigger equipment changes, whether it's purchasing a kayak, whether one of these years, Pat, I'm going to build a canoe. I'm going to do it. I'm going to build a canoe. It's like, it's almost like a bucket list goal that it's something that I want to do. And that's always the like I get the I'll pull out those plans and I'll go to Home Depot and I'll take a look at what it is that I might want to get. And I haven't done it yet, and it's probably not going to be this year with a 6 month old. It's at the time like a 1 year old, but still like that's kind of like on these big like dreaming big kind of like reassessing my equipment. It is when I got my 8 foot kayak this past year. Like, do I want to try and get something like motorized to put on either the back of a kayak, or do I want to bite the bullet and get myself something maybe used that will give me the ability to be able to have like a motor on the back and totally open up my world when it comes to fishing. I almost make it akin, Pat, to when we got our PlayStation 2. I was probably a freshman, you would have been like a junior in high school, and we got a PlayStation 2 that kind of like totally opened up a new world of video game playing when we were younger.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing about getting a motor on my fishing experience, right? And so that's something that I'm kind of like reassessing in the fall. And I'm kind of trying to kind of like dream big in those moments. But the making it out onto like Lanier for a personal day or so in the fall, I want to spread it out a little bit more
Hmm.
next year. I didn't take any fishing days in the fall, and I want to. Now I am in season. I'm coaching in the fall, which makes things really really difficult
Right.
to kind of like get out there. My Saturday mornings are shot, so which would be kind of like over the course of a fall, that would be the time that I would otherwise be able to get out there on the lake. So,
Hmm.
or I'm sorry, yeah, out there on the lake, out there on the river. And so for me, I want to kind of spread out those personal days a little bit more, so that I can get out there in the fall a little bit more. And the it's when I got up to Lanier Islands this past year, the weekend before my 6 month old was born. We had an opportunity to be able to go up to Lanier Islands and do a little bit of fishing up there. Obviously, my very pregnant wife was not coming out there onto the water with me, but she had a kind of like a relaxing day in the hotel room, and I was able to go out on the water for a couple of those mornings, and that was really awesome. And I caught a couple of fish. I caught probably two or three fish on the morning or so that I was able to go out there. So that fall fishing is something that I'm looking forward to as well. And then making it onto the Chattahoochee during that spawning season would be great as well. That's going to be dependent on how the spring goes. If it's a disaster in the spring, I'm probably not going to be as eager to get out there. But that'll kind of depend on how some of these trips go in the spring.
Yeah, for sure. Moving into the winter, obviously you don't get quite as much cold weather down there. Up here, we do get pretty cold weather. Our lakes do freeze over. The lake near me hasn't really done a whole ton of freezing in the last few years. This year it did freeze over for a little bit, probably for about a month. I didn't have the opportunity to get out there on the ice this year. Years past, I've gotten out a couple times, usually just utilizing, just this standard ice fishing rod, doing some jigging. Haven't caught anything, but that's kind of like a life goal for me: catch a fish while while ice fishing.
Listen,
Um,
same. I was just talking about one kind of like bucket list item being building this canoe. Another is to get out there ice fishing. So one of these days, Pat, when I'm up there, we got to get ourselves out onto the ice when that thing is frozen over enough for us to be able to do it. And I see no reason why we can't take maybe a morning or so when you're coming down here to be able to go out to, even if we can't go up on like a guided trip, to be able to go up to Lake Lanier and be able to do a little bit of fishing. So, so yeah, these are bucket list items, Pat, that I have to think that we can check off the bucket list.
yeah, definitely
And
think that'd be
I'm looking
fun.
forward to the opportunity to maybe be able to do that with you.
Yeah, definitely. Generally for the lake near me, February tends to be pretty much the only time, unless we get a real cold snap in January. Usually February it is the time where it's cold enough for a consistent amount of time that it gets actually frozen over. But I do have, I have an ice fishing rod which has gotten a little bit of use. I also bought a tip up, which, if you're not
Mhm.
familiar with ice fishing, it's kind of like a more or less a ice fishing trap, right? You drop your
Yeah.
line down there. It's got a little reel, a little flag pops up with a fish is on the line. Then you
Hmm.
like kind of hand reel them in order to grab them. So I'd be willing to experiment with that if I get back
Yeah.
on the ice anytime. It is fun being out on the ice, kind of just hanging out on the ice. It's kind of peaceful, similar to like hunting in that regard, right? It's like quiet. It's kind of
Hmm.
it's just a fun experience, but. For you, obviously, it doesn't get quite as cold down where you are.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can do? Like, do you still fish through the winter? Is there things that you're like doing in order to like, to get out there or to improve your chances as you move into the spring?
Yeah, so yes and no, and so I was talking before about how kind of the fall is my kind of like dreaming big in terms of reassessing equipment and stuff. I dream much smaller when it comes to winter time, but it's kind of when I start to reassess some of my smaller equipment, like any new rods that I think that I need to get, or any new lures that I need to restock at this point, to make sure that I'm fully flushed out and ready to go for the season. Like a tire, if there's something that like some fishing like clothes and stuff. I got a couple of fishing shirts and jackets and stuff like that that I'll maybe want to try out, and I'll make a couple of purchases there. Any new lines or anything like that. So it's a lot smaller changes that I'm kind of implementing during the winter time. But as I was saying, like with the fluctuating days, you can catch fish with some of that kind of weather fluctuation. And so I'd love to be able to get out there for a couple of those warm days that end up popping in that like late winter, right on the brink of
Mm,
early spring, some of that maybe even like late January, early February time, which is still kind of like very much considered like winter fishing.
yeah.
But try and get out there maybe once or twice. The thing about that is that if you remember, a lot of the days that I'm taking to go fishing are personal days that I'm taking off from work, and so it's really hard to know a week and a half out when we're supposed to be putting in our leave, like whether, okay, well, that's going to be the day that's going to pop into like the high 60s.
Hmm.
That's going to be the day that I'm going to go fishing. By the time that day rolls around, it's already too late for me to take a personal day. So it gets a little bit tricky to try and kind of like pin that down. But I could always try and kind of like gamble and then like do something else if that day ends up rolling around. But then I'm burning a day taking a personal day where I'm not
Yeah.
fishing, right? So it's kind of that delicate balance. But um, I want to scout a couple of new spots too during the winter, and especially those on the Chattahoochee, but also those on kind of like Lake Lanier and some of my more familiar spots. During kind of the winter is when I do kind of some of that scouting for where it is that I might want to find myself when it comes time to be doing a little bit more of my routine fishing in the spring and the summer.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are all great ideas, trying to improve your chances as you move into those spots when the weather is a little bit nicer as well. Very cool. Um, okay, so I think before we end this, I do want to talk a little bit about our goals for the season. Now, this is a
Yeah.
good opportunity for us to put this down like on paper, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
and then we can talk about them at the end of the season and see if we manage to check these goals off. I mean, I personally find it really helpful to set goals, and I usually try and make sure that there's at least one or two that are like not success based,
Yeah.
things that
Hmm.
like are that you can do, just like it's just hard work. It's just something that you can do it regardless of whatever nature is throwing at you, right? Like catching a
Yep.
fish, right? There's a lot of things that you can't that are out of your control, right?
Right.
Getting a deer is a lot of things that are out of your control, but you know going to a new area, or hunting a new area, fishing a new area that you haven't before, getting that opportunity, that can be a goal and that can be a success as well. So I think it's important to lay those things out, and and then we can hold each other accountable in that regard too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
But so for me, as far as fishing goes, I have three goals that I want. One is to get out in the canoe, particularly with the girls. I want to get them the opportunity to be out on the lake in the canoe. They had fun the last time, taking our canoe out. It hasn't seen water in like 3 years. So, I mean,
Yep.
just getting it out there is going to be a success in and of itself.
Hmm.
But I think it would be fun with the kiddos to get out there. So, that's goal number one. Goal number two is to get out fishing at least 4 times when I'm in York. That moves us into like kind of like the summer, right? In the middle time frame, I'll hopefully be able to get out a few times, and then ideally, I would love to be able to do that, do some surf casting with some pizza on the beach too, because that sounds like fun, and that can definitely
Yeah.
count as one of those 4 fishing opportunities there as
Yeah.
well.
Uh-huh.
And then the last goal, which is one that ultimately I don't have a lot of control over this, but it would be super awesome, which would be to catch a fish with the girls. I
Hmm.
think that seeing them see, I mean, I don't know, maybe they won't like it, but I think there's an opportunity there that if they see what that's like, it could really instill a new hobby or something that they may
Hmm.
really enjoy. So kind of
Yeah.
excited to see how that goes. But Mike, moving into the spring, the summer, what is it? What are your fishing goals kind of looking like right now?
Yep. And this won't come as a surprise to anybody that's been following along, but river fishing and getting out on the Chattahoochee is definitely one of my goals. And what I like about what you said, Pat, is that that is accomplishable. Like
Yeah.
I can do that. It just takes me kind of it's going to take me like mustering up the courage in order to do it. If I catch something, that's great. But I got to get out there on the Chattahoochee, and so that'll be one of my goals. Maybe it won't be something that I accomplish until the fall. Maybe it won't be something that I accomplish until early spring. But I do want to get out there on the Chattahoochee. I want to try out the new kayak and a couple of new spots in some of those familiar locations. So get the new kayak out there on the water again. That's just going to be the difference of like packing that one up as opposed to the other one. So that's very achievable. But the new spots in the familiar locations, trying out a couple of spots that I'm looking forward to doing, like along Lanier, a couple that overpass that I was talking about during the summer. So like branching out a little bit in terms of some of those familiar locations that I fish that point so much, and there's a couple of other spots that I want to kind of give a solid try to, and it's going to mean not fishing that point that morning, but I definitely want to do it. And then similar to what you're saying, Pat, catching a fish with the 3-year-old would be fantastic. It could be with like on my father-in-law's boat. It could be from the dock. It could be from the canoe. Regardless of where it is, I feel like that would be like such an awesome thing to have happen, because it would be me being able to share with my daughter something that I love so much. And so for all of those reasons, I've got a similar goal of trying to catch a fish with the 3-year-old. Out of the three, that is far and beyond the least likely to happen. But you never know. Every time you get the line in the water, there's a chance you could catch the fish. So I'll remain optimistic. But for the other two, they're achievable regardless of what the fish are thinking. So I'll look forward to kind of seeing what it is that we do with this and holding one another accountable, as you're saying, Pat. That I think that'll be huge for this too.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Yeah, I think those are all awesome goals, and as you said, I think they're definitely some that are going to be achievable there. Some may be harder than others, but I think it's going to be exciting as we move through the season to see how many of those goals we can check off.
For sure.
All right. Well, I think we've had some really good conversation here. We've I think we've done a good job kind of laying out our fishing season plans, as well as kind of some of our preseason tactics and what we're kind of doing in that regard. So in that way, I think we're pretty much covered. Any last thoughts before we close this one out, Mike?
No, I'm sitting here thinking, like, those of you that are listening along at home, you guys hold me accountable too. Like fun, like sound off on the social media and be like, Mike, you got to get out there on that river. Stop going up to Lake Lanier. Stop going to that same spot. You guys can hold me accountable too. No, this has been awesome, Pat. This has been an episode where I've been able to talk about something that I love so much with fishing and setting up some goals for myself. Like I always work best in my writing life, in my professional life, in my teaching, and it goes for my fishing and for my outdoors adventures too, when I have like a solid outline. So this goal setting and kind of like mapping out what it is that's to come is hugely helpful for me too. So thank you, Pat, for kind of helping to structure this one and put this one together. And I'm really excited to. This is getting me even more jazzed up and excited to be able to get out there. I'm going to be probably at work tomorrow, putting in that personal day for March. What was it, March 19th?
Yeah.
That I'm going to put in to try and get myself out there on the water. So
That's awesome. All right. Well, for all those who are still listening along, thanks for listening. I think we had some awesome conversation here. If as we said earlier in the podcast, tell us how we're doing. Let us know if you have any questions, anything you want us to cover. Let us know on our social media, and we can get to some of those questions and potentially cover some of those topics that you guys want to listen to. But for now, thanks for listening. And as always, get outside, have some fun out there. Thanks for listening to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast. If you have questions, comments, or have an idea for an episode, feel free to follow us and reach out over social media. Don't forget to rate, review, or tell your friends about the podcast. And until you hear from us again, get outside. Have some fun out there.